Hello, welcome to Pull to Open, an ongoing quest to watch all of Doctor Who in random order. I'm Chris Taylor.
And I'm Pete Paschal.
And we started this week with the Doctor Who theme.
We did. Why wouldn't we?
Yeah, exactly.
You know, I mean...
we got to have a theme.
We got to have a theme, and if we have a theme for a podcast, it's that it's Doctor Who, and we love it. And the theme song is so good in all of its forms, except maybe the Matt Smith one. But in all of its forms, other than that, it's just timeless and awesome.
At some point, we should rate our favorite versions of the Doctor Who theme.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ron Grainer, by the way, and the BBC stereophonic.
Delia Derbyshire. It was very much Delia Derbyshire's composition.
Oh, nice. Kudos.
And then Ron Granger kind of
took the credit.
Kind of tweaked it around. It's definitely a Bob Kane, Siegel and Schuster kind of situation.
Oh wow, yeah. Bill Finger really created Batman, as we all know. Chris, how are you doing, man?
I'm doing pretty great. Yeah, it's the first week I'm fully vaccinated. And spring has sprung in San Francisco, so I'm having a great time. And we're revisiting the Doctor Who of our youth. So it's what could be better?
What could be better? Yeah, no, it's looking great outside. It's looking great inside, if you can go inside. I think we all go inside. But things are looking bigger outside, as opposed to the inside. I don't know where I'm
Things
going
are
with this.
bigger on the outside.
Yeah,
I think that should be the slogan for coming out of lockdown 2021. Come on out. Things are bigger on the outside.
Indeed.
I think we've been stuck in our TARDISes for nearly a year now.
Yeah, and I think the swimming pool has been empty for a while.
Or are they transmat capsules? I don't know.
Right. Or side rats.
But yeah, so previously on Pull to Open,
mm-hmm.
we've been using this randomizer to visit episodes in random order. And what we have seen is a lot of Brigadier episodes. We had one double Brigadier episode, and we've now come to the other double Brigadier story, Mawdryn Undead.
Yeah, Mawdryn Undead. This is a very special episode for me, and it's because this is the very first Doctor Who episode I ever saw, at least to my memory. It was quite an experience. Because I had no idea what I was watching, and you kind of have to picture where I was, which is northern Canada, the city of Edmonton, and we had in our household on the north side, we had never had cable television. And cable television in Canada, the big thing it meant was that you got the American networks, of which there were only really 3 at the time. This is pre-Fox. This is 82, 83. And, but you would also get PBS. So shortly after we got cable, my brother was sitting down one evening watching a show with the new cable. And it was, I saw this crazy opening credit sequence where it had the Davison credits. So it's
the stars going.
Yeah, you got the stars, and it just it's really in your face, right? Like the Davison ones. It's like boom, the stars come at you, and it comes into the theme dun, 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 and it's very whoa, and this is sci-fi, it's very much this is going to be.
Oh my god,
you're
his
in for a
face
ride.
Is made of stars.
Yeah, so
his
I thought
face is literally made of stars.
So I was really ready for this. Epic space adventure, and then it cuts right to this British school in the countryside with a couple of ridiculous-looking, kids. I guess they definitely didn't look like kids in suits and
jogging past.
Yeah,
yes.
And then there was we'll get into the story, but I remember thinking what is this? I thought this was going to be some sci-fi adventure, and I was honestly ready just to get up and walk out. And then suddenly it cuts to the big thing where Turlough is pulled into the thing with the Black Guardian, and it was like, oh, okay. So then I was like,
So
now,
so speaking of the 80s, I'll just take it on a brief tangent here while we're thinking about overgrown schoolboys, which is the other thing from the 80s I watched for the first time this week was Footloose.
oh,
Which I'd
nice.
never seen the movie Footloose, in which Kevin Bacon, aged late 20s, plays a high schooler. Um, and does it much better, much better than unfortunately than Mark Strickland does as Turlough.
Yeah, much more
But
convincing. You thought
yes,
the
slightly
bacon?
more convincing as a high school. So it is possible. I could see what they were going for, but yeah. But before we get into Mawdryn Undead too much, and it is, I want to talk about how it's a very special show for me too, and it was certainly not my first Doctor Who, but it was the first when I realized a lot of the timey-wimey implications and the possibilities of the show.
Hmm.
Um, but let's talk about where we were last week. Pyramid, the End of the Earth, and the Lie of the Land.
Hmm.
We've done some TikToks for it. How's the show doing on TikTok, Pete?
The show's doing very well on TikTok. Yeah, thanks everyone who's following us there. It's super fun to make these. We love to take just a little bit of the show that we're doing, put it with some footage, and sort of get you some of the highlights. And yeah, apparently a lot of other people agreed, or at least thought that it was interesting to watch our take on that. The monks, yeah, not the best Doctor Who monster ever. Um, it's
Yeah, we can learn a lot from why the monks didn't work.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, no, it was super fun. We're doing a bunch of these each time. Um, the everything with we've done a couple with Capaldi now. So we did some with
Mm.
the what was the one we did? Sleep No More. We've done a bunch for Inferno. Inferno's great. When you have a 7 episode story, you've got a lot to choose from in terms of material, which is nice. But
Yep,
no,
for
TikTok's
sure.
super great. Follow us there. We're at Poll to Open. And
And on Twitter, we did something unusual this week. We actually watched the episodes live together for the first time,
we
and
did.
did a whole live tweet stream under the rubric, the hashtag Mawdryn rewatched. So go check that out
Yeah, no, it was
for
great.
immediate reactions.
Yeah, it actually brought me back to what I used to do on Twitter for a living, which is like live tweet various tech events, and it was I just kind of the rhythm came back. Oh yeah, you just fire off various things, various observations. That was super fun. But yeah, we'll definitely do more of that in the future. Hopefully, we'll split it out a little more. We did it all in one night. I think we got a little ambitious there. Um, we'll do some more of
I
that.
like the idea of the tech event version of live tweeting this show. I think would be Mawdryn Unboxed.
Yeah, the Mawdryn keynote.
Uh,
I don't know. He'd be
Mawdryn
good.
Unveiled.
Yeah, the guy who plays
Well,
Mawdryn. I
we
think he'd do a
also
good
had
do
the
good keynote.
we had the Apple Spring Loaded event this week, so
We
maybe
did.
it's
Although
Mawdryn
these,
Unloaded.
yeah, it's funny. These events. Well, I don't know. These events are no longer events because they're just broadcast now. So we're doing it for real now, man. With the
Yeah,
watching Doctor
if you're
Who.
going to live tweet pre-recorded stuff, you might as well make it classic Doctor Who from 1983.
Exactly. But yeah, the tweeting's fun. Watch for more of that. We'll definitely be more on TikTok, and we're also on Instagram. Well, might as well get them all out, right? Pull to Open
Mm.
63. Yeah, we're getting some of the videos from TikTok there. I guess I shouldn't say those are the same. It's a different audience. They're totally original for you guys on Instagram.
Yeah,
Um, so,
exactly. They're just
yeah,
completely different from TikTok
yeah,
stories.
nothing recycled here.
Anyway, shall we get to the part that I'm dreading? The
Yeah, I
part of the
know, man. It's
show
your turn.
that's where we recap. It is my turn to recap the story, the entire story that we were watching in a segment we call TLDW,
Hmm.
for either Too Long Didn't Watch or Too Long Doctor Who. Too Long Doctor Who.
Well, it's definitely
Uh,
too long. Definitely not too long. Don't watch because we hardly endorse watching the show. Um,
yeah, I mean that's a description of the entirety of Doctor Who. Too Long Don't Watch, except we will do it for you.
exactly.
Um, yeah,
But
all 26 classic episode
in
seasons.
in case you haven't seen Mawdryn Undead, or if you haven't seen it in a while, like Chris and I, we'll recap it for you. And Chris, I believe it is your turn.
It is my turn, and we do this without notes, without preparation, without writing anything out beforehand. And I'm kind of dreading this because it's such a twisty plot with so much involved. But I'm ready to give it a shot. I feel like contestant on a game show.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like we could pause it. I could phone a friend halfway through and be like, "What was that thing? What's the thing with the homing beacon in episode 3?"
Right.
But yeah, I'm ready.
It's going to be a challenge. Okay, per custom, you will have 30 seconds per episode, and Mawdryn Undead being a 4-episode story, that'll get you 2 minutes.
Okay.
I feel
I'm
like
ready.
I did some of the work for you already, though. When I was talking about my first experience with Doctor Who, I feel like you could pick up right where like Turlough runs off the road, but we won't. We're not going to handicap you.
I needed a handicap on this one.
All
Seriously.
right. Okay. Are you ready to go?
Ready.
All right. 2 minutes on the clock, and go.
Okay, so the Brigadier is now in the school. It's 1983. He's retired. He's teaching math in the school. This kid named Turlough steals his car, runs it over. In a dream or sort of pixelated weirdness, he meets the Black Guardian, who tells him that he has to murder the Doctor, and then he'll return him. He returns him. Turlough returns to school. The Doctor, meanwhile, is running into a thing called a warp ellipse, which is created by this mysterious ship. Beams on board it with Nissa and Tegan, and they get out, and then they transmat down to Turlough transmats up to the station. This is where I start to get confused. Turlough gets up there. They go back down, or the Doctor tries to go to Earth in 1983. Thinks he's done it to locate the source of the beam. That means that TARDIS can't move. Meets Turlough. Meanwhile, then he frees the TARDIS. Meanwhile, Nissa and Tegan return to Earth in 1977, where they find the transmat capsule with a burned creature who they think is the Doctor, and they find the 1977 Brigadier. And anyway, both sides of this weird flip story then go up once the Doctor has reminded the Brigadier of who he is, because the Brigadier has forgotten the Doctor for some mysterious reason. They both go back up to the ship. Turlough has to try to keep the two Brigadiers apart. The Doctor has to try to keep the two Brigadiers apart. Mawdryn is the burned guy who is convincing everyone that he was the Doctor, and it turns out that he and his 8 mutant friends need the Doctor's regeneration energy, but they actually use the Brigadier's energy from meeting. The Brigadier loses his memory, returns them back to Earth. Mawdryn and his fellows die just as they wanted, which was a rather convoluted way of committing suicide.
Wow.
Turlough joins the Doctor.
Great job. 6 seconds. Anything else?
Oh, God. Yeah. It's Jubilee.
And time.
The Queen's Jubilee in 1977.
There was the Jubilee. That was the Jubilee, all right.
Yep.
Great job. Wow. You did it in less than 2 minutes. Nice summary, my friend.
I realized that I kind of been practicing that in my head all week because I also read the Target novelization.
Oh,
and
okay.
I think I had to do. It's the first time I've done that in any of the shows we watched. Like I dipped into it for Inferno, but this time I read the whole thing.
You actually read it like in the past 2 weeks, you mean?
Yes.
Wow.
After we live tweeted the show, I read the Target novelization. It's available on Scribd. It's super short. It's like 150 pages. It really is Peter Grimwade kind of phoning it in and just sort of turning his script into a story with the minimum of additions, the minimum of effort.
I sort of vaguely remember he did that for Time Flight as well. I could be wrong. Yeah, so he wasn't...
almost certainly.
Wasn't like Eric Saward, who would often go into these weird digressions that had nothing to do with the story because he had to get some weird sci-fi brain fart out of him. Read the Twin Dilemma sometime. It is really weird.
Oh,
anyway.
God.
We're not here to talk about novels, though. But it would be. It's going to be. Let us know as we go. You know what departures the novelization has, if any.
I mean, spoiler alert, there weren't really any, but it was maybe a few extra things. Like Turlough really hates Canon Whitstable, who was never seen in the show, and never explained why he hates them in the book either. But that's sort of a big thing in it. But it was useful to read it just to keep track of all the comings and goings between the ship and Earth. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's what I've been dying to ask you, Pete. Is did you were you confused by the going back and the forth and how they got there, and the transmat capsule and the homing beacon and all of that stuff?
Yes. Like, well, the first time I watched it, completely. I'll tell you this. Let me tell you this,
Yeah.
George. The first time I watched this, which I was brand new to Doctor Who, I didn't even know the inside of the TARDIS and the exterior were the same place until episode 2. I
Wow.
kept wondering, like, how are they in this weird hallway with round things in the walls, and then suddenly they're running by this police box in a spaceship somewhere. Like, what? That doesn't make any sense. Remember, keep in mind, I was 10.
Yeah.
Um, but so like that was all. Yeah, I couldn't really keep track of the comings and goings. I mean, the thing is, the story is a bit convoluted in that sense, and it's not helped by the production design, because one of the things that's so weird is that like the transmat capsule is also like the TARDIS, like it's bigger on the
Yeah.
inside, which is kind of nuts. So it's another thing. Like, again, if you're new to the show, you're like, what? Like, is that a different place? But the main thing
The
to keep
novelization
straight,
does, by the way, confirm that the capsule is dimensionally transcendent in the same way as a TARDIS.
yeah, serious technology, as Ace might say.
Mm.
But the what was I going to say? Oh, the main thing to keep straight is the two time zones, right? And
Yes.
that it does pretty well. Like, you kind of get it once that sinks in, which is, it's pretty quick. Like, oh, there's 1977, there's 1983, and they're kind of both working to sort of reunite somewhere, which is the ship. Then that's fine. Then that works. But all the sort of back and forth of like the Doctor coming down, and then the homing beacon, and everybody trying to find various things. I couldn't tell you who left here when, and like
Mm.
I just remember Nyssa and Tegan are trapped in 1977 with the young Brigadier, the Doctor and Turlough in 1983 with the older Brigadier, and they end up all meeting up on the spaceship, which I guess is in 1983. That's the only thing that really makes sense.
Yes, it is, and and it's super weird. And the ship is supposed to be inspired by the Flying Dutchman.
Ah, okay.
That was Grimwade's inspiration here.
Well, it's funny.
It's the idea.
He name checks two other ships, which I thought was funny.
Yeah,
Where Tegan's wandered around in the first episode, she says it's like the Queen Mary, because it doesn't really remind her of a spaceship. It actually reminded me of like Vegas hotels, like Vegas hotel lobbies. Um,
too much corridor.
yeah, lots of corridor. And then she says, "Oh, there's no like." She says the Mary Celeste, which I thought was a little bit clever. Um,
Yeah,
since
it's not the Queen Mary, it's the Mary Celeste.
yeah,
Very clever, Tegan, and also she's cleverer than a lot of English people at the time who were pronouncing Marie Celeste, but it's more proper to say Mary Celeste. Um, yeah, just a minor nerd point there,
that's a ship
yay,
nerd
Doctor
point. Wow, didn't know you were a ship
Who. So
nerd, Chris.
it's interesting that you watched this at age 10 because so did I.
Oh wow!
Um,
I think I might have been
I,
9. I was either 9 or 10, because it was on
I was
PBS,
not. Yes,
and it was either late '83 or sometime in '84. So I'm pretty sure it was '84 though,
the,
because there was there was a delay between when it was broadcast in Britain and when PBS would sort of put it in its run of Doctor Who.
yeah. This was 1983. I was 9, going on 10, and I watched it. I watched it live. And I did a thing which is almost unthinkable today, which is I missed part of an episode, and I'm pretty
Oh,
sure that it
why?
was most of episode 2, because you just did that in those days. Like, your
Right?
dad would want to watch something on another channel, and it wasn't such a big deal. And we had a VHS, but like, tapes were scarce, and
Who knew how to
you
program
know,
things anyway?
I would not have been allowed to tape Doctor Who unless it had been like something very like the Doctors. I might have been allowed to use some precious tape for that, but
Hmm.
not Mawdryn Undead. So I was as fooled at the time as Nyssa and Tegan are by this creature, Mawdryn, claiming to be the Doctor.
I honestly can't
Um,
remember if I was fooled. I think I wasn't. I was just more confused by everything, but
yeah,
not just confused, right? Like, I was intrigued by everything. This is the cool thing about Doctor Who, and why, even though this episode is, ostensibly for longtime fans, right? They bring back the Brigadier. There's a lot of references to the Doctor being a Time Lord and other references to other episodes. But I think a lot of shows sort of wrongly assume, that you can't make anything. You can't make it too impenetrable, and there's truth to that certainly. But I also think like if you're doing enough world building, if you're taking your own story seriously enough, like fans will sort of know, like do their own headcanon, or not really fans, but new people will sort of do their own like headcanon to sort of come halfway, and as long as you're telling a good story, they'll stay with you. Because I could tell, like, okay, this is clearly like there's some backstory here I'm not privy to, even in my sort of 10-year-old mind. I was maybe necessarily articulating it quite like that, but I got it, and I was like, oh, okay, but this whole time travel thing is pretty interesting, and I want to see how it turns out.
It is so fascinating that you came in at probably the timey-wimeyest episode story of Classic Who, which is what this is. Doctor Who doesn't really get this timey-wimey again in the classic series, does it?
No. And it's funny, like, how few episodes actually use time travel as a plot device.
Yeah.
The only other one that really comes to mind, I'm sure there's a few, but is like Day of the Daleks back in the Third Doctor era, which was made a big deal about the paradox. That, the self-fulfilling paradox of, like, the Terminator, where you go back in time to prevent something from happening, but in fact cause it to happen.
I believe that's where the Blinovitch limitation effect comes from, which is mentioned a lot in here. It was technobabble from Day of the Daleks.
Yeah, and in this time it seems to mean when you meet yourself, you short out the time differential. Is that what happens with the Brigadier's touch at the end? Okay. This is like... That's weird, obviously, and I don't know if they've ever used that again, and I don't think... The way they've done it here, I don't think it's necessarily like a thing you have to do every time, because they kind of get away with it with this warp ellipse. Again, more technobabble. Like, maybe that's because the Doctor says something about the energy came from the TARDIS. He shorted out the time differential, something to do with the warp ellipse. So the unique circumstances of this episode, which is that it was convenient, and it was part of the writing at the end. They had this weird energy discharge happen, because it never seems to happen ever again when people meet themselves, right?
It doesn't, and it's completely abandoned in the rest of Doctor Who. And as much as this episode pretends to have some sort of connection to Doctor Who mythology, it really is uninterested in exploring it. Right, because there's so much going on. And now that we have the internet and we can read up a little on the creation of this episode, we can understand why it's kind of a mess in a lot of ways. But yeah, watching it age 9 or 10, you just sort of, at that age, you so readily accept that things are serialized and that you never get much backstory on stuff. This is why Star Wars worked so well with that age group, right? You're used to walking into things in the middle of episode 4, missing stuff, and
Totally.
Certainly in that day and age you were, and you just kind of, you cotton onto things a lot faster than you would otherwise. But yeah, Doctor Who went some very interesting places with Mawdryn Undead. Definitely sparked and terrified my 9-10-year-old mind. I cannot remember any other episode of Doctor Who that has so given me the heebie-jeebies, where I was so mentally cringing behind the couch.
There's a lot of... Well, what was scaring you specifically?
I'll give you... I mean, the best way, I think, to remember Mawdryn Undead is to think of, like, 3 or 4 scenes that stick in my head. One is Mawdryn wearing Tom Baker's coat with his brain pulsating. And that is so scary that it's a cliffhanger. By the way, the other mutants were supposed to have pulsating brains as well, but it was too expensive, and that's why they're all wearing brains in a jar.
They didn't have that much spaghetti. They ran out. No, there was no stores close by. I get it. Doctor Who was made for $5 an episode back in the day, folks.
They couldn't get enough pasta for $5. It was super weird. But yeah, it's like, even though it's clearly spaghetti, it's pulsing. And this was 2 years after I was terrified by what I now know to be one of the worst episodes of Star Trek ever, which is Spock's brain.
Oh my, you were terrified by Spock's brain.
I was terrified at the age of 7.
Just the idea of it?
Traumatized.
Like someone could take your brain
pretty
out?
much the idea of it. I think I was brain phobic. Like I
Interesting.
still am. Like, I watch something like Hannibal, and it's super when he's like eating the policeman's brain in the movie.
Hmm.
It just kind of really gets me on a very visceral level.
I
I
take
have a
it
thing
you
about eyeballs, and I think about
you
brains.
were probably
And
never much of a fan of the zombie genre.
I was never really exposed to it, and I didn't really get into zombies until I got into Shaun of the Dead first.
Hmm.
So that helped to neutralize it, I think. That it was presented first as a comedy thing. But yeah, I think it would have been way too scary for me as a kid. And just, a lot of the ideas of having your brain removed, presented in Spock's brain, never thought of that. McCoy at the end kind of loses his mind trying to put a brain back together, and they just kind
Right.
of treat it as this light brush off thing. And I'm like, no, that's what has happened to McCoy. Oh my God. So I was traumatized by that. I was traumatized around about the same time by Flash Gordon. Again,
Hmm.
thought about things that aren't traumatic today, but like Zarkov
Oh,
loses his mind at one point.
there's like in some early
Uh,
'80s stuff. There's a lot of sort of bleak, scary stuff. I was actually just talking about this with regard to the Black Hole, which is a very eerie movie
yeah,
for kids. I mean, and not just sort of the jump scare stuff of like the robots cutting up people, like the just the
very
whole
dark.
sort of metaphysical nature of it. Was
Yeah.
really, it was like 2001 for kids almost, and I remember seeing it when I was around that age, and just like, well, that's kind of not totally freaked out, but a little bit freaked out. And there's
Yeah.
definitely vibes of that here. I felt like a lot of the stuff on the ship where you're kind of alone, but something sinister is afoot by like even just sort of the one of the sort of eeriest things, I guess, of almost like decor anywhere is like when you have all these busts sort of looking at you, these
Yeah.
people, but they're not people because they're statues. So there's that little area of that. I felt like that was a bit freaky. And yeah, there's a lot of times where people are sort of wandering the ship alone with this sort of 80s sort of synth music, but it's still like,
Hmm.
like, ooh, what's going to happen around the corner? And to a 10-year-old mind, you're kind of like, okay, this is kind
Yeah.
of freaking me out.
To a 10-year-old, corridors are spooky. Um,
Exactly. They
and
do
the
a good job
Black
making
Guardian, I
corridors
think,
spookier.
is a lot. The Black Guardian was a lot scarier at age 10. Now he just looks like an old dude with a bird on his head. Uh, and you're like, why are you wearing this leopard print coat? It's super, and you're wearing a bird on your head. What is going on? Is this Portlandia? Um, but back at the
Yeah.
time, he was pretty scary, and Valentine Dial's voice was
Oh, he's a
super
treasure.
scary.
He's a treasure.
Um,
Like
he,
that guy. Like who could be better in terms of that evil
he
voice,
will,
that booming. You will never escape me, Turlough. Like, I mean, he doesn't even have to twist his mustache. His not that he has one, but I
yes,
mean, his voice does it for him. Yeah,
he has
just
the
great.
best and scariest voice, had the best and scariest voice in television, and he was also Hitchhiker's Guide. He was Deep Thought, both in the radio show and the TV show.
Yeah.
He was the computer that comes up with 42. And so that's that iconic booming voice very much tied my 10-year-old brain into these other things as well. And I think I vaguely remembered the Black Guardian from his Tom Baker run.
Yeah.
So it was scary for that reason. Visually, the two other things that absolutely freaked my head out age 10 were um, Tegan and Nissa aging suddenly.
Yeah. That
Their
was really
aging
terrifying.
makeup is incredible, and the way they just suddenly cut to them,
Yeah.
like you're not expecting it, and suddenly you cut to them, and they've got all this aging makeup on. And you're like, holy shit, because you are used to Doctor Who being at a certain level
Yeah.
of cheapness, and then here they come with this really professional makeup.
That scene is so
Uh,
good. It really just punches you. Like you're just like even
yeah,
today when I saw it again, I was just like,
yes,
oh wow. Like
it
okay.
is the one effect that still stands up, I think.
Yeah.
Um, and then finally, when the Brigadiers touch, the screen flashes to white.
Hmm.
And that, to any child growing up in the early 80s in the Cold War, I think that said nuclear explosion, right? So
Right.
that was
So
the
you
other
thought that
thing
was
in
it?
1983
Yeah.
keeping me up at night was like it didn't, I didn't think nuclear explosion, but it sort of reminded me that that was a thing that was constantly on my mind at that age. And 83 was like we seriously could all have gotten up in 83. You know, there's that whole thing with the famous the Russian officer who decided to stand down on an alert that turned out to be nothing, like a flock of geese or whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, that was 1983. So this was like you see a bright white flash on the screen. I'm sort of kind of morbidly waiting for this moment in my real life. So that kind of dragged me back there. Remind me, it was definitely not all chocolate boxes and rainbows growing up in the 80s.
Well, why don't we also talk about one of the darker elements of this episode to
Mm.
stay with the theme, which is Turlough himself.
Yeah.
So this is kind of a first for Doctor Who, and I think I remember seeing some interviews with John Nathan Turner around the sort of little after this time, and talking about how he was very deliberately trying to make the companions more interesting and trying to shake things up. And Turlough is probably sort of the apex of that in terms of companions because he's the first bad guy companion. He's a snake in the
Mm.
TARDIS. He's an agent of the Black Guardian who is there to kill the Doctor. Um, what do you think of him? How do you the character, the performance? Does he work in that sense and both in this story and just maybe even more broadly since we've already visited his departure in Planet of Fire?
It is so freaky doing it in this order, isn't it?
Right.
We
I feel like we're the
we
river
hear about
song of Turlough, right? Where we're encountering him in reverse order almost. But anyway,
it's like in Planet of Fire, we hear about the solicitor in London being a crucial part of the reason that he is there as an alien refugee, basically installed on Earth. Um, and in this episode, the headmaster talks about having to deal with the solicitor in London in way more meaningful voice, and he almost kind of looks at camera as he says it, like
hmm,
this is a meaningful moment that is never, followed up. Yeah, I think again, it's a tale of two experiences. I think at the time, Turlough really worked because we see that there's something off on him about him. We see that the Doctor is sort of surprisingly incurious about this creepy kid.
yeah, I
Um,
took that to mean, and I didn't really read this at the time, obviously, because I hadn't seen the episodes, and it took me a while to actually get to this, but I feel like he's kind of reacting to Adric's loss still. You
Ding, ding,
know?
ding, ding. Yeah,
Yeah,
that is confirmed. There's another thing that's confirmed in the Target novelization. Is the Doctor's still feeling bad about Adric, and that's sort of why he basically needs another young male school child to travel along
oh
with,
my god, that
which
sounds
sounds
so
so
bad.
wrong now.
But
But
he wants
yeah,
another war. He wants another Robin. It's Batman.
yeah,
But he just so readily accepts him. Like as soon as he walks in the TARDIS, he's like, "Oh, Turlough, this kid. He's just wandered in. He's here to help. He can come with me." Like he even takes Turlough with him to
yeah.
Earth without like instead of Tegan and Nissa, his actual current companions. And then at the end, he's just come on board.
And
You're
in terms of him being a pawn of the Black Guardian and there to kill the Doctor, why? Like, okay, the cliffhanger at the end of episode one is that he's got a rock dangling above the Doctor's head. He's about to
mm,
bring it down on his head. Good cliffhanger. Rather weakly resolved when the box the Doctor is working on explodes and pushes him backwards. They're like, whoa, Buster Keaton moment. Um, but he had so many other opportunities to kill the Doctor.
yeah.
Like, why not just shiv him? Every schoolboy that age would carry a knife.
Yeah,
Just, just,
it's times are tough,
stick it in the guy.
Brendan. Um,
Is it the Black Guardian sort of trying to maneuver him into this position where he'll lose all his regenerations at once? Like, is that? He's like, you could stop
well,
him, or you could throw a rock on his head,
yeah, this is
but
kind
then he
of where
does suggest the rock over the head thing.
well, this like, and this comes up in later episodes where the Black Guardian actually accuses Turlough at one point of exactly what you are, which is that you've had several opportunities to kill him. What are you doing here, Turlough? And I feel like that is the one thing that is redemptive about him, that he's very conflicted about killing the Doctor, but he's otherwise kind of as a character. Like he's fairly cowardly. He's kind of cruel. Like he's introduced as this very cruel schoolboy, really the bully.
Yeah,
to Hippo
or
or
Hippo.
Ibbotson's. Um, who I got to say, the guy who plays Ibbotson,
Hmm.
Hippo, he looks exactly like the guy who played Skippy in Family Ties. Um,
I
I
don't know the show,
I
but
remember because that was a big show at the time as well, and like the friend of the family who's like the nerdy guy is named Skippy, and like I literally like you could put him side by side. They're like the same actor,
that's
and
hilarious.
it's just a weird quirk. I don't think they're literally the same actor, but it was like wow, like the sort of nerdy, bespectacled, dark-haired kid. Very very common. But
Well, let
back
me
to
tell you what a British child would read into Ibbotson immediately. Like
tell
with
me,
the glasses, Billy Bunter. I don't know if that's a
not
character
doing
you've
much
ever
for me.
come across,
No,
but it's a series of children's books, I think, from the early 20th century. Um, Billy Bunter was sort of this, because it was not a PC age. Billy Bunter was a kind of a fat loser, um, but he was the center of, yeah, and sometimes sort of the hero of his own narratives. Constantly being bullied, constantly looking for sweets, candy,
oh,
um, and desserts, and like it was so ingrained in the British mindset that public school, i.e., private school, meant a Billy Bunter style character who was
right.
always being bullied. Um,
Do you
so
remember
it just
Young Sherlock Holmes, the movie? I feel like you just described the
vaguely, yeah.
Watson character in that movie as well, who was super into sweets and who probably looked like all of these same people we're describing, sort of the
Yep,
bespectacled nerd.
the
Um,
bespectacled nerd. How far we bespectacled nerds have come.
Indeed, right? But back to Turlough. So, interesting notes about Turlough. He is the last male companion of the classic series.
Mm,
He's the last non-human companion in the classic series because he's not from Earth, which
yes,
the this episode doesn't make explicit, but is very clear. He does not like being on Earth and is from this is the mystery of Turlough, which was in addition to being a bad seed, who he is, where he's from, that was a mystery.
which they really could have amped that up a little bit more. It's a little confusing just based on Mawdryn Undead
Yeah,
to
agreed.
understand that
And
he's an
and
alien.
it's honestly like now that we've already done Planet of Fire, when it his origins are finally revealed, it's a bit of a letdown, and I feel
Mm.
like they kind of retcon things in a way that doesn't make sense because he says a couple times in this episode he wants to get home, which doesn't really like he's supposed to be a political prisoner who is in exile. So why do you want to get home exactly? Like, wouldn't presumably you be arrested? I mean, are you thinking you're going to be just lay low on some island somewhere on Tryon? Like, I'm not sure what his plan was there, but
Yeah, home system maybe. Who knows?
yeah, or something.
But
But
yeah,
getting
he
back,
didn't really have it figured out at this stage, did he, Peter Grimwade? It's sort of it
yeah,
does feel like he had so many great concepts and he's phoning a lot of them in. He's not thinking through a lot of these implications. And why
yeah,
would you? I mean, to a certain extent, in the time, Doctor Who was hackwork for a lot of writers, right? It was not necessarily something you bring your A game to.
uh, though.
Um,
Yeah, a lot of these sort of threads don't quite work, but the story itself does, I think, based on the sort of timey wiminess of it. But just getting back to
yes.
Turlough for a bit, I don't ultimately. I think Turlough he's pretty strong in his first episode, given what he's sort of promising, and I just wish that it was paid off a little more with regard to like where his character's from, what he ends up meaning to the Doctor, because I honestly don't think in Turlough's entire run he ever quite fully redeems himself. Even
Mm.
though he, in Enlightenment, he decides to betray the Black Guardian instead of the Doctor. He's always still just kind of like this coward who's kind of whiny throughout. Yeah, I don't
Yeah,
know if he ever
he's
fully
hard to
comes
like. It
together.
is hard to like. It's hard to like a character who doesn't have any agency. We saw this in Pyramids of Mars
Hmm.
with Dr. Scarman. Um, like we don't really. He's as a villain, he's kind of because he's mind controlled the whole time.
Right.
Turlough is struggling against the Black Guardian, and maybe that's sympathetic, but it's like we didn't like him in the first place.
Yeah.
He's introduced as an asshole who,
And that's the thing. I think what they needed to do with Turlough was ultimately unpeel why he's an asshole. and it because all that backstory just gets thrown at us in his last appearance in Planet of Fire. It's never we're never he just kind of plays that part as sort of the cowardly asshole here and there without any sort of depth to it at all. And even then in his last appearance, he kind of just it's not quite. It's not quite. You don't quite get the motivation and the character depth that I think that journey deserves, which could have been really interesting.
Yeah, and even watching it in the order that the randomizer has taken us, the randomizer loves Turlough. Turlough is the randomizer's favorite companion,
Clearly,
if you don't count the Brigadier. But it's shown us 3 Turlough episodes now, and even seeing the Turlough he would become does not redeem the Turlough in Mawdryn Undead.
Yeah.
In any way, shape, or form. He still comes across as an asshole.
Yeah, agreed.
But yeah. But one who, I mean, the actor was a lot braver, given that he was basically hooked up to a car battery. During the episode.
Yeah, that's interesting. So he has the little crystal that the Black Guardian gives him that he holds, which I thought was actually really cool, especially at the time. I mean, it's not the greatest effect, but it's like it gives you a bit of a visual thing to hang on to with this bond, as opposed to like he suddenly, the other option might be he just goes into a trance at certain times and then, talks to this thing that isn't there in the way that, I don't know, like Quantum Leap or something would do it. So that was actually okay. But apparently they lit that thing up with a car battery. And, I mean, the car batteries, I guess, costing more than $5. Maybe they just pulled one out of like one of the cars in the parking lot. And I'm just, I'm surprised Mark Strickson is still alive to talk about this.
Yeah, seriously. It wouldn't be allowed today. And all for that one effect where he's just sort of shaking his hand with the crystal in it.
Right, yeah.
Right, and it's lighting up. Well, I guess it's to provide the light, but also like you can briefly see the wires in that moment.
Oh, where it's like super glued to his hand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You see the wire going up his arm. It's hilarious.
Yeah, it's funny.
But yeah, there's so much going on in this story, and we know that Grimwade was kind of working under the auspices of John Nathan Turner, kind of imposing all these things on him. First of all, you have to introduce Turlough. Secondly, we have to get the Brigadier in there, and it was originally not going to be the Brigadier, right?
That's right. It was supposed to actually be Ian Chesterton, one of the very first companions of the Doctor, which I would have loved to see. Honestly, I feel like,
my God,
Ian
loved the Brigadier, but missed opportunity.
Yeah, what they've done a lot in various other like novels and comics and stuff, and bringing back Ian for other stories. I mean, you kind of like really get a sense of like, oh wow, you could do so much. It's like a wellspring of interesting things you can do, even if the character is pretty straightforward, as sort of the younger action hero when he was conceived to be paired with the first Doctor. But yeah, he was supposed to come back and reconnect with Ian, and that makes a ton of sense that it's based in a school, right? Because he was a teacher, and this would have been a very good harkening back to Doctor Who's origins, and you get a lot of that fan service. But unfortunately, William Russell was unavailable, so for some reason they decided to get the Brigadier and have him retire to become a school teacher, so he could match the script, which is not terrible. But as, of course, a side note to that, by doing that, they inadvertently, for all time, screwed up the dates of the unit era, because this episode, more than any other, probably pins down when the unit stories took place, because it specifies the Brigadier retired a year before the first time zone, which is 1977, so he retires in 76. Which is actually about 4 years before the first unit story is supposed to be set. So it has created this incredibly, I would say, almost, serendipitous accident, because it's produced so many fun fan theories and references about unit dating. But I don't know. I'm pretty sure. Yeah. The production crew of Mawdryn Undead would like to have this one back and fix those dates, because they've screwed up everything for all time for anyone trying to pin down when the unit stories took place.
these days you would say they were just trying to mess with us. They were deliberately trying to troll us by putting the Brigadier in this role. You're deliberately trying to troll this question that had already arisen about our unit stories set in the 70s or 80s. And by deliberately having a Brigadier on both sides of the line, I mean that would today be interpreted as a screw you to fans, or a nod to the whole controversy, right? The way it is in Day of the Doctor, where Kate Lethbridge Stewart says something about, look in the unit files, 70s or 80s, depending on dating protocol, some babble like that, just to
Right.
acknowledge the controversy. But I had not read until so I went back to Doctor Who magazine, read the fact of fiction recap of Mawdryn Undead, and they lay out the whole Brigadier theory of how you can have all of this make sense within the same timeline.
Oh,
And unfortunately, we will never see it, but it's based on the idea that there is a Brigadier adventure that we have never seen, and the Brigadier adventure features him retiring from unit in the 80s, being transported back somehow, timey-wimey wise, to 1976, realizing that he has to lay low
oh my.
to avoid sort of, meeting himself. So that's why he chooses this out of the way school, um, you know, which I don't believe is cover story for a second. I don't believe the Brigadier is a math teacher. I don't believe he knows how many beans make five.
How many
And
do make five?
yeah, but
What is the
but
answer?
also I think part of this theory is that Benton also has to go back with him because he says something about Benton being a used car salesman. Is that right?
He does, yeah. Which is
So
like
that's
it's one of the kind of amusing asides, and you kind of like go, oh, like all these cool unit guys who were part of this top secret task force that tasked with um, thwarting alien threats. Surely they could sort of write their own ticket after that, right? And go on to be
yeah.
these great. But no, he just goes and sells used cars in some town,
You would
someplace.
think that, but that is actually what Jeff Hurst, the hero of British World Cup, the English World Cup victory in 1966, English captain Jeff Hurst, or striker Jeff Hurst, was selling used cars in 1983.
Oh my,
So
was that actually a direct reference to that?
I don't know. I mean, but it was just the sort of thing that footballers did, right? So it just sort of, you weren't used to people in the public eye kind of getting famous from being in the public eye, or getting rich from being in the public eye. It just didn't necessarily follow in those days. So I could see Benton kind of downgrading himself.
Going for the
But
quiet
that's
life.
the other reason I like this theory, was that was a cover for Benton as well, because obviously he had to lay low to not run into himself.
Hmm.
Um, and it just, yeah,
So
that's my headcanon now.
it's a
It,
pretty
it
good theory.
resolves the whole unit dating dilemma, and yeah, I like it.
Resolves part of it. We could go into why Pyramids of Mars doesn't actually sync up with stuff either, but Sarah being from 1980, which is a little off if the invasion is 1979. Anyway, we
Yeah.
can do that
Sarah
next time.
likes to round things down to the nearest decade.
Right. Yeah, that's her
That's
thing.
yeah,
But the story's definitely notable for that. It's notable for that flashback sequence. So when the Doctor,
Mm.
tries to jars the Brigadier out of his memory loss, which I thought was very, very good. I mean, it was just this deep little.
Oh.
The music's good. He whispers it in here, calls him Colonel Lethbridge Stewart, which I really liked.
Mm. God,
Again,
that was
not
a beautiful
really,
scene.
not really getting that the first time, but the later after, it was like, oh yeah, man, he used to be a colonel. And then they show which was really pretty rare for the time. These clips, right? Because you didn't really get reruns much,
Mm.
and they actually
Exactly.
show footage from some lost episodes. Like the invasion was pretty much lost by then, and they show the Cybermen from the invasion. They showed a Yeti. Those ones have since sort of come to light, I think, at least some of them. But at the time, it was like, oh wow! Not only is it like a flashback, it's flashbacks with stuff you can't even ever actually see. They really went to the archives of the BBC and
Yeah.
showed off some good stuff. So yeah,
This
definitely.
is these days you'd call it fan service, but we didn't have that phrase back then. But that's absolutely what it was. because you wouldn't see reruns in 1983. We had just, and I still remembered it fondly, in 1981 we'd had a series of Doctor Who reruns called The Five Faces of the Doctor, and it was a story from each Doctor, and then including
Yep.
the fifth face, which they counted Logopolis as his story, which is kind of a cheat, but
Oh,
meant
because
we got
right.
two
Yeah.
meant we got two Tom Bakers, so I'm fine with that. Um, but like that was the only time I could remember any Doctor Who reruns on BBC, which is weird because like it's so great and you have that in your archives. The BBC does repeats all the time. I don't know why they didn't fill more of their schedule with Doctor Who. But anyway, they didn't. So we had to make do with little moments like this, almost like a little fan film of the Brigadier's history. And you're right, it is super creepy. The radiophonic workshop music in the background, the Doctor leaning in and the Brigadier saying, "Something's just walked over my grave," and the Doctor saying, "Perhaps it was a Yeti or a Cyberman." I love, and he's like zeroing in on him, and he knows that he's got him in his thrall, and he name checks all of his unit assistants, which is
Right.
nice. Not in order. Joe Grant apparently comes first, then Sarah Jane Smith, then Kate Shaw.
Right. Liz. Liz
Liz
Shaw.
Shaw. Sorry.
Yeah. No, they name
Sorry,
checks
Liz.
all of them. Just slowly but surely goes down that tunnel, starting with the unit people like Benton. Harry Sullivan, he mentions, who was apparently doing something hush hush with NATO, which was kind of funny because they took that one line and Ian Marter, who did some of the novelizations and played Harry
Yes.
Sullivan, actually ended up writing a novel. Or maybe someone ghostwrote it for him. Who knows?
Yeah, whole spin-off.
Yeah,
Just based on one line. It's
and
fantastic.
it was just like a sort of a fun James Bond-esque yarn. I remember reading it. It was kind of fun. But one of the other things this does in terms of not necessarily fan service, but continuity, it is the story that really the first one that explicitly spells out, like unequivocally, how many regenerations the Doctor has and how many he's
Yeah.
used. So the 12 regeneration limit for Time Lords was established in the Deadly Assassin, even though they'd shown the Doctor, regenerating. They didn't call it that until Planet of Spiders, but they spelled that out already. And we always kind of I think it was always thought that Bill Hartnell was one and then the rest follow. But this is the first time the Doctor says, there's 8 mutants and 8 of me. If I give them my remaining regenerations, I'll no longer be a Time Lord. So this is the story that does it. That essentially confirms the quote unquote orthodox view that the Doctor, the Peter Davison's the 5th Doctor. Now, all of this, of course, was retconned again in the most recent season with the Timeless Child, which threw that whole thing out the window and endorsed a whole completely different point of view. But this is it's funny, like the show went this long before really stating this stuff out loud. It's funny that there's all parts of the show that fans kind of do and adopt, which is like the 5th Doctor, like you calling the Doctors by where they come, right? Like the 5th Doctor in sequence, and but that's never done on screen. And this is one of those things, right, where there's you kind of piece it together from things on screens, but it took this script to actually say it out loud.
Yeah, and it's funny revisiting it and realizing that's where I knew it from. And it's sort of you're right, it had to be mentioned in Deadly Assassin in '76, but it was never said that the Doctor had that many. Brains of Morbius obviously had more images of the Doctor flashing on screen. That's a whole other, continuity
Right.
controversy there.
So this story basically is oh, never mind that. No, we're not going with that. That was a one-off thing.
And maybe it was to have 5 Doctors, just to be very explicit about how many Doctors there are and why one of them is going to be trapped in a vortex. I guess they had to. That was very much on their mind. They had to lead up to that.
True.
But it's wonderful, and it is sad that it's sort of treated so casually, and that they don't ask more about it. Like, oh yeah, tell us more about Gallifrey, Doctor, and tell us more about why you have 12 regenerations and how this whole thing works. Which you'd think companions would be interested in. Brigadier might be a little interested in, maybe, but no, it's just sort of thrown out there. I have 8 lives left. There are 8 of them. They want me to use my lives to kill them,
Right.
which is the more I think about it, the more I see that this whole plot is, it's like the Flying Dutchman stuff has been kind of buried, but the whole
Hmm.
plot is about a bunch of 12 mutants who want to commit suicide.
Right. Exactly. Which is kind
Uh,
of weird to me because it's like, okay, I get that you continually regenerate,
yeah.
but surely if you crashed into a supernova, like,
Hmm.
not that, what is there to regenerate? You know what I mean? Like, I don't see how this is a problem. If you just want to die.
Well, this is, in a very Moffat way, using a lot of ideas that aren't quite panned out. But the idea is that this ship is not supposed to be pilotable by them. It's their
Right.
people sent them into exile, and it's just, like the Flying Dutchman. Every 7 years, the Flying Dutchman was allowed to come to port. That was the myth of it, and this one is 70 years. So every 70 years, they are programmed to land near a planet, which is why they arrive, and then they stay there for 7 years, I think, which is why they arrive in 77. And they're, desperate by 83.
Right.
Uh,
So they can like get help, I guess, but
yeah,
never quite happens. I get like I mean, because Mawdryn goes down. Well, I guess because they shorted out the time differential. So Mawdryn goes down to he's regenerating, degenerating, and then like I guess all the mutants on board are just sort of never woken up
yeah,
over those 7 years. So that way, that's why it just sort of
yeah.
hangs
Only
out.
only
Yeah.
one of them gets to leave. He's the designated dude. But like, why not just go? Why not beam down to Switzerland where euthanasia is legal, and just have their best experts come back up to the ship? Like they really didn't think about, like, were they seeking out the doctor? It's not quite clear. How did they know that he would use his regeneration energy? Or like, there are just so many coincidences happening here to start with.
Yeah, there is. I feel like there was a lot to unpack with like there's probably a whole adventure you could talk about how the mutants or whoever was the leader, apparently Mawdryn, like stole this stuff in the first place because apparently it's stolen Time Lord technology.
Yes.
So there's a lot of like interesting little threads here that are never like fully explored. And yeah, I mean, but story wise, yeah, I just never really bought that the mutation thing was this unsolvable thing, and it also kind of like if you think about it, particularly with subsequent episodes like whether it's the Five Doctors or when the Time of the Doctor, where the Time Lords grant regeneration energy or promise to grant regeneration energy to people to if they do something they want. Why not just give some to these guys and let them die?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And that is an interesting thing. The randomizer has taken us from an episode where the Doctor uses regeneration energy basically as a light show.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Yeah.
and
In the
and
lie of the
he
land.
had
Yeah.
used it in the Lie of the Land. And then he'd used it previously in that season to just give Davros a little bit of extra life. And now we go straight to a story where he's like, no, I will not use even a little bit of my regeneration energy to kill you poor creatures who are suffering.
Well,
Um,
and at the end where they're like, well, he's forced to do it because of Tegan and Nissa's condition. It's a little bit like, well, how about I just hook up Tegan and Nissa to this thing
yeah,
and burn like only 1 or 2 lives to fix them, but not you guys just fend for yourselves, right? I don't know you guys. You're not my friends.
it is super weird that he right at the end he does, and I did sort of miss this out in the recap, so we should probably go over it in a little more exactitude, because Tegan and Nissa cannot leave. The TARDIS has to go through time to escape the ship, so they are
Mm-hmm.
either going to get young because they have been mutated by some disease that the mutants are carrying, but it's not quite clear what that is. Um, but anyway, it's sort of the Doctor agrees finally to. I guess he agrees to give up his regenerations,
Mm-hmm.
which
He does.
because it will also heal them. And you can hear the questioning tone of my voice. I say all of this because I'm like, despite having watched the show multiple times, despite having read the Target novelization, the motivation makes such little sense to me still that it's
Well,
I have to
I,
say it to understand it.
yeah, I mean, you could stretch it that his sympathy for Tegan and Nissa caused him to essentially change his outlook toward the mutants. And like when he lashes out at them when they ask him to do it in the first place and says, "Oh, this is the product of your own twisted ambition," or I forget the exact line, but he says something like that, and he's very kind of dismissive and angry. Um,
Mm.
but maybe that's not him because that's a little bit out of character for him, and maybe he really does feel guilty and feels, or for whatever reason, feels it's his responsibility to get them out of this. And he, when he's sort of forced to do that for Tegan and Nissa, he kind of comes like he loses his own reasoning for not doing it for them.
Yeah,
I think his selflessness sort of takes him over in a sense. That's how I would
which I
twist
can
it.
buy.
I wouldn't buy.
I can buy that.
It just
There's
wasn't
no dialogue.
agreed.
That tells us that.
No,
Yeah.
you kind of need to. It's definitely sort of headcanon or head character development.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I was also thinking to pick up on the Time Lord thread, like why they wouldn't simply sort of give them some energy to kill themselves. Like I think the Time Lords want to send a message to the universe. Don't mess with us. And these mutants serve
Wow.
as an example. Like you don't steal our technology. We are in charge. And here's what happens if you cross us.
That is a great idea. That
Yeah.
is okay. That's we're retconning Mawdryn Undead. That's the reason that they're exiled. It's not that their own people have sent them off in their ship, as they claim. It's that they are an example to the universe that the Time Lords are assholes.
Yeah, well, and that. There's certainly a lot of evidence,
We
implicit
will
and
mess you up.
explicit, about that.
You want regeneration? You got regeneration.
Yeah. So yeah, I do kind of like that in a retcon sort of way.
This might be a good time to segue to our regular segment, which we often do at the end of the show. If the evil plan had succeeded,
Right.
because this is the evil plan here, right? It is to steal the Doctor's regenerations. It's only headed off at the last minute randomly because the two Brigadiers meet, and that via the TARDIS provides the energy they need to kill themselves.
Apparently,
Again, not super clear.
the TARDIS can be pretty powerful at random times.
Yeah. TARDIS, mass mutant euthanasia device. Just simply plug into
that
a
button
beneficent
there.
imitation effect.
Is that button there?
There's a little instruction sheet somewhere of how to make two Brigadiers meet to create the energy needed to power the TARDIS to
Yeah,
kill
but it's
people.
all visual. Like you got to have it because
Yeah.
it's like an IKEA instruction booklet. You can't really have it written out unless it's like old High Gallifreyan.
So if the evil plan had succeeded,
Right.
and the Brigadiers had not been there, and the Black Guardian had been able to keep them apart, which is sort of, again, by the way, side note, really out of character for the Black Guardian to be like, oh no, let's not mess stuff up. Let's not sow chaos into the universe by having the Brigadiers meet. That's going to mess up my plan. But he did know what he was talking about. Anyway, he wanted the Doctor to lose his regenerations via the mutants. That nearly happened. If it had happened, he still would have been left with his current body, right? He still would have been alive.
Right. I think he still would have essentially been the same actor. So Peter Davison would just play the Doctor until he died, and then there would be no show.
So, first of all, like, is the Black Guard? What does the Black Guardian do at that point? Does he say, "Oh, thanks, Turlough, sayonara"? Or is he like, "Now you got to kill the final incarnation, Turlough"? Or is he like leaving him alive to ponder on what he's done? Make it kind of worse.
That's a good question. I think he gets Turlough to kill him then. Then he's like, all right, Turlough, now pick up that knife. And I think that's what he does. I don't think he walks away because the Doctor can always spin something up and reverse everything while he's alive.
Yeah. I think what it would do, and maybe this is going to be an interesting sort of what if Big Finish audio drama someday, where they could just sort of remake Caves of Androzani.
Well, that's where I was going to go next. Yeah, with if he couldn't regenerate, boom, Perry's alone in the TARDIS, and he's just dead.
Or at the end of Caves of Androzani, like you set it up so there's some crack in the universe where you can talk to the Time Lords. or some communicator allows her to talk to the Time Lords, where it's Perry who has to take the Clara role of begging the Time Lords for another regeneration cycle
Oh,
for the Doctor.
that's not bad.
Um,
And I feel like the
which would,
Davison Doctor is a good one for that. Like I
it
wouldn't
really
do that for
is.
Colin Baker. Sorry,
Because one
Colin.
of the things we love about Caves of Androzani is the Doctor's in genuine peril. So what if
Agreed.
you amp that peril up even more? And there's definitely that suggestion at the end of he might not regenerate this time.
Yep.
So they raise it already. It's the plot is ripe. So I kind of wish the evil plot had succeeded. And you
Well,
know what? I wish the evil plot had succeeded and that each one of the mutants before they died had turned into, Colin
yes.
Baker, Sylvester McCoy, Paul McGann, John Hurt, who you actually could have got in at a younger age. And then the final one is just baby Matt Smith, who was 3 months old at the time that Mawdryn Undead was screened.
Oh, that's hilarious. I would have loved to see a remake essentially
Yeah.
with that happening. Like he does it, and then it's like, you hear I don't know, David Tennant. Well, that was interesting. Oh,
Well, yes.
all right
And then
then.
he says it twice, and you're like, "What? Whoop! Two young David Tennants."
That was a timey
Uh,
wimey time. Oh, no,
this
my
does sound
Tennant's
like
really
perfect
off.
fodder. It sounds like perfect fodder for a YouTube Doctor Who
Yeah.
editor, doesn't it? You could sort of see Mawdryn Undead intercut with like images of these other Doctors. Maybe you CGI them on those
That would be amazing.
regenerator
I
platforms.
want to see this happen. But to the point, I would
Yes.
love to see. You're actually zeroing in on something that is very different from the classic series and the new series. And it's not something the new series did right away, but over time. The Doctor got very Superman like and very invulnerable, and regeneration became this thing that, essentially they by the end of the Capaldi era, be basically is talking about Time Lords are virtually impossible to kill, and you need to go to this special planet and give them 10 different poisons, like etc. They basically became
Mm.
super resilient, and that wasn't really the case in the classic series. Like the Doctor was more vulnerable. He did seem more human. Yes, he regenerated, but it was never like clear if that was a thing that would just happen no matter what happened to him in terms of like physical trauma. And I miss that. I really like that about the classic series because it was like the hero was a little more vulnerable. Like you did get episodes like the Caves of Androzani, and this one even you really
Yeah.
believe he's going to die if Turlough lays that stone on him. You think like I wasn't thinking he's going to regenerate even after I learned about Doctor Who. I thought like if he gets clocked in the head and his skull is crushed in, he's dead.
Yeah.
But the new series assumed to make clear that that's not the case. That the Doctor could come back even if there was like probably a single cell of him still
Well,
alive, and I don't really like that. It's a little too he's a little too invulnerable now.
I, I'm going to take issue with that just purely because as a kid watching Doctor Who, I was sort of irked at the fact that they just sort of lazily put him in physical peril repeatedly because I had this sort of certainty that he would always regenerate. And I didn't even buy it in case of Androzani. Like, I know that that was the intention, and I see it now. But at the time, I was like, well, of course he regenerates. It's Doctor Who. Like, don't you know anything, random evil person who wants to kill the Doctor on a random planet? It felt like it relied on that too much. And that's why Mawdryn Undead messed with my head so much. Is
Yeah,
because not seeing the scene. Basically, I think maybe all I missed of the show rewatching it, when I first saw it in '83, all I missed was that first scene with the weird burned, semi-naked Mawdryn.
right.
It's just sort of the weirdest point.
So wearing a
I
toga.
caught up with him when the random teal toga, and regenerating costume was super weird as well. But I I caught up with the point where he could have been the Doctor, where he's in the TARDIS, and Nissa has already covered him with the Fourth Doctor's coat. I'm like, what is this? Suddenly the Doctor is in physical peril, and regeneration is a thing that has happened in response to some physical peril that I haven't seen. And like suddenly it was hitting exactly that button in my head of like, oh, I know that the Doctor's always going to be safe. And this triggered this sense of, well, is he?
Hmm. Right.
Is regeneration always safe? Or regeneration is kind of a weird process. Maybe it gets out of control sometimes. And I'll tell you something else weird, but the fact that he's wearing the Fourth Doctor coat
Yeah, I
is,
really like that. Anyway.
I love that, but also that was playing with my emotions,
Hmm.
age 10, because Tom Baker was very much my Doctor. You know, everyone, when they have their first Doctor, the first Doctor after their Doctor never matches up.
I would
Like,
agree.
even in years to come, you sort of kind of tend to appreciate what they've done. I'm sure, you know, Peter Davison was your Doctor, then you'd rather have less love for Colin Baker.
I do,
But
and I defend that even with you're correctly identifying a bias here. I think for all
yeah,
fans,
so
and
Tom Baker
it's
was
not
my Doctor.
yeah, it's not just the bias for your preference of the Doctor, but the Doctor that came after. Yeah, but there are other reasons not to like Colin Baker. But I digress. Go ahead.
Yes. But Tom Baker, I mean, if you're a Tom Baker fan in 1983 and you're never thinking that you like Peter Davison, but you know he's never quite matched up, and here you are, here is not just that moment, but the entire story of Mawdryn Undead. Tom Baker is like the ghost at the feast
Hmm.
because you have the companion who saw Pertwee regenerate into Baker. You have two of the companions who saw Baker regenerate into Davison.
Hmm.
You know, you have the coat, which young me had me hoping against hope that somehow they were going to turn him back, and maybe this moment was sort of a be careful what you wish for.
Oh, oh,
And
wow, yeah,
yeah, and it was the anniversary year, and you know we didn't yet know that I think that Tom Baker wasn't going to be in the Five Doctors. Um, but you know, we knew that he was sort of the Christopher Eccleston of his age. That at that time he was just refusing to have anything to do with Doctor Who.
right.
So
Messing, yeah,
that,
it's definitely messing with you. And
yeah,
probably yeah, I could definitely see how that would backfire for certain fans at the time. Now I only kind of look back and appreciate it because it's like just a
mm,
callback, and maybe I think that's how they intended it.
yeah,
But I could definitely see getting messed with, like particularly because Baker was such a, he was the doctor for so many people. Um, I could definitely see that was a almost traumatic.
I I think Nissa should have just gone the whole hog, by the way, and just wrapped him in the scarf as well.
Right,
Just like,
right.
hey, Doctor, you're cold. Let's cover up that pulsating brain and stick a brown hat on you. Um,
We'll
they
stick a
should
like
just
a stovepipe hat.
They
Yeah.
should have just trolled Tom Baker in the way that Stephen Moffat trolled Chris Eccleston in The Day of the Doctor, where John Hurt almost regenerates into Eccleston.
Right, right.
Like
So
he
you can almost see
just
the
almost
eyes.
sees, yeah, the
Oh,
top of the ears coming. Like, you know, like the whole story is so almost Tom Baker. We're almost giving you Baker that they should have leaned into that.
hmm. Um,
And to take you back to Jubilee Day, a very special day, which should be in the memory of everyone watching this in 1977, because Britain really did go nuts for the Queen's Silver Jubilee, and you know, to
clearly,
take it back then, which is when Tom Baker was on TV, you know, so there are just so many callbacks to the 70s here.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. By the way, which Brigadier's hair do you like better? I couldn't really tell which one was the wig. Um,
I know you suggested it was a wig. I don't think either of them were wig. I think he just dyed his hair black for 1977 Brigadier.
and did he just go back and forth? I mean, like, or did he do all his scenes of
Yeah,
1983 Brigadier and then do all the scenes for 1977 Brigadier? I guess
yes,
that
I
would make
think that's what
sense.
they did.
Wow,
Yeah.
film that the wonders of pro TV, man. You can do things like
I
that.
know. Before we could just, you know, computer generate hair color, they should just get creative with the filming schedule.
Yeah, and he always looks better without the mustache. Like it only happens a couple of times,
Mm,
but it's like because the mustache was almost always a fake mustache for Nick Courtney. Um,
yes,
yeah, I mean, you
he's
can't.
more charming without it.
Yeah, it's so bad it's good when you look back at the old episodes, but yeah, when he didn't have it here, it was like, oh, okay, that's actually pretty good.
I love that the idea, by the way, is that the Brigadier goes back, 1977 Brigadier goes back after this traumatic experience. His memory is expunged. He completely forgets the Doctor, and what's the first thing he do? shaves his mustache off. So it's like, is the mustache connecting him to the Doctor in some way? Like he has to shave it off because it's got this traumatic connection.
Yeah, the weird thing is he sees the TARDIS dematerialize.
Yeah,
And you would think that would jog something, but instead he just kind of like looks at it weird. And yeah, runs and gets a razor, I guess, and a new car. Um, so
and that's when the
ultimately,
Brigadier knew how many beans made five.
like well, what did you think, Chris? Does this thing hold? Does it hold up? What was your verdict on this? Then I'll tell
Yes
you
and
mine.
no.
Yeah,
I think, like a lot of Doctor Who, it holds up as a tone piece. It holds up in individual segments. There are scenes, obviously, it still send shivers down my spine. The timey-wiminess was very ambitious. Um, the Black Guardian stuff does not hold up, I don't think, at all.
well,
In
especially
fact, drags.
his screensaver background does not hold up, but
It's so 80s.
yeah. Oh
It's
my
like
God!
it's so
Like
80s
the
that even in
music
the 80s
too.
it looked. Yeah,
Might be the most 80s music of the whole era, and there was some serious 80s music throughout the Davison era. But yeah,
yeah, yeah. The weird pixelated background where he meets the Black Guardian is just, oh,
yeah.
it's so bad. The bird on the head. No, that stuff doesn't hold up. The Turlough stuff doesn't really hold up. But I just wish that we'd had, like, introduce Turlough next week. Just focus on the timey-wimey story. Focus on the Brigadier. He should really, like, there are already too many characters in this. Get rid of the mutants, or just bring them in right at the end. Focus on Mawdryn. Tell us more about Mawdryn. Like, it had such potential,
Hmm.
and it's definitely one that you can, like, we've already done it so much in this episode, retconned it in our heads. That,
Yeah. And there are good parts of
there's
that.
something there.
Well, here's the thing. I think
Really
I'm a
good
little
stuff.
more. I can't. Maybe it's because it's the first episode I ever saw. I can't um, bring myself to say it's an Ogron. I think it does work. But I'll say I think you're wrong about Turlough in this story. I think Turlough is quite good and promising as an interesting character here. Now it's too bad a lot of that promise wasn't totally fulfilled. They didn't know really what to do with him in places. He never quite redeems himself in his arc. But in this story is sort of like as a thing we've never seen before. This companion who is outright not quite outright evil, but is working against the Doctor. That's very interesting. And
Yeah.
Mark Strickson is pretty good. I mean, I think he's overplaying certain parts of it, but he doesn't really know where the character is going either. And you are sort of torn on him, right? Because you don't like him, but you sort of have some sympathy for him because he's being manipulated by this person who's really evil. So Turlough in my mind works, and I like that he's here. I don't necessarily love that he's in this story. And I feel bad for the Brigadier as sort of a fan, like I feel like this is an inglorious not end to him. I know he goes on to do other episodes, but it's like sticking that character into this story that was meant for Ian. For this, I just don't. I don't. It leaves kind of a bad taste. As good as it is to see him, and I love Nick Courtney, as you know, I just don't think this treats the character that well. But I think the story overall, because the timey-wimey stuff works, the two time zones, like you kind of really get it, and when they converge, you have this natural increase in suspense.
Yeah.
Structurally, it worked for me. It came together. Now that said, all the things we talked about apply, which is that there's too many corridors. The mutants aren't very threatening. There's just a lot of sort of fluff and confusion. Could be better overall, and definitely a lot of wasted potential. But overall, like I think the combination of all those things really made it work for me. So it's a Dalek.
So I think just on the Brigadier point, I'm actually kind of glad that it was the Brigadier. I mean, yes,
Yeah.
I'd love to see the Ian Chesterton version, but the Brigadier has certain qualities that make him appropriate for this episode. One is his tendency to just blunder off down corridors on his own, because
Hmm.
he's very certain of what he's doing. And there's that moment where Tegan whispers after him, "Chauvinist." When he orders Tegan and Nis to stay in the TARDIS, which is very Brigadier.
And they just
But
do.
also,
I mean, it
yeah,
frustrates me about this era. And I know it's a different time,
yeah.
and women were written differently, but Tegan and Nissa are not well treated in this story. And yeah, it's not.
We expected more from Tegan, especially.
Agreed.
Like, we know that she is willful.
It's like when they get her in that white outfit, she just kind of like fades away a bit. Like in that white outfit, I got to say, just to get it out there, I think was one of the worst choices they could have made for that character. I feel like not only is it a impractical outfit, it doesn't match the character at all. Like they really didn't get her fashion sense until the last season, where she was in these much more bold 80s outfits, and trying to get everyone into sort of a costume, right? Which is kind of what was big at the time. So like she had the air stewardess thing in her whole, virtually her whole first season, and in this white thing for her second season. I mean, just really poor choices.
The white outfit was just such an obvious and now rather icky John Nathan Turner attempt to show more skin on the show.
Yeah, unfortunately.
And speaking of, ickiness, Nissa also has a new outfit, and the Doctor literally looks down at and says, "Indeed."
Right.
Which is like, what? What are you even thinking of writing that in there? The Doctor, this is classic Doctor Who. He's supposed to be sexless, and you've just had him look down Nissa's shirt.
Yeah, I feel like Nissa was one of the first unofficial crushes from one of the companions. Like, just previous to this story in Arc of Infinity, she finally like gets to put on a dress, and she seems eager to show the Doctor. And there's a lot in this season of the two of them. I wouldn't quite call it sexual tension, but there's something going on there. I feel like it's good that Tegan came back pretty quickly, because who knows what the Doctor and Nissa were really up to while she was gone.
I mean, Nissa's hot. I'm just going to put that out there.
Oh,
I was probably crushed out on Nissa at the time, and she was the smart one. She was very much the Hermione of Doctor Who in her age, and that was very attractive as well. So
smart and sensible.
Yeah, exactly. So maybe there was, that can also be a headcanon that there were Doctor crushes, and we can unpack those as randomizer journey continues.
Maybe we'll continue with more in this saga of the Black Guardian, the new Black Guardian saga here that they did, which I got to say, as a fan, I was pleased they didn't forget about him and that issue that he had, because basically they had. When the Doctor escaped the Black Guardian, that's actually the genesis of the randomizer, and he put a randomizer in the TARDIS.
Yes,
and to evade the Black
Guardian. And the Doctor
Guardian,
takes it out.
He takes it out eventually.
He takes it out just before the Leisure Hive, I believe.
Or in the Leisure Hive, or I forget. He has to leave it somewhere on some planet because he has to. I think it was the Leisure Hive. I think he actually, like, in that episode, it's like he solves the problem with some tech, and he had. Part of it was removing the randomizer, and they're like, "Well, wait." Romana's like, "Don't we need that?" He's like, "Nah, can't spend the rest of my life just running from some guy." And so
it's all right. I'm sure the Black Guardian won't show up again in any way, shape, or form. It's not like he's the personification of universal darkness and evil or anything.
And so he does, and I'm glad they didn't forget about it. Yeah,
I'm glad the Doctor did abandon the randomizer, because it means that we picked it up and we added it to our own TARDIS.
Exactly. So, shall we do it? Shall we see where we're going next?
Or do we want to talk to the randomizer?
We could chat with the randomizer.
We could try this. We're going to try this new segment called Interview with a Randomizer, where I will, for the purposes of dramatic tension, play the part of the randomizer, explaining why he brought us here. Pete, you will interview the randomizer, and but just to spice things up, the randomizer is going to have a random accent, and I don't know what that is. And Pete, I want you to give me a random number between 1 and 12.
Okay, let me do it. Here we go. Going to generate, and it is 8.
Okay, 8. All right. So begin the interview. I'll begin the accent.
All right. Hello, randomizer. How are you doing today?
Hello. I'm all right there. All right, lad. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm glad you're
it's all
feeling
right,
it.
this, isn't it?
Yeah, it
It's a
is. It
lighter show. I
is.
like a bit of Doctor Who.
Yeah, I'm glad. Well, I'm glad you're here to join us today and are able to speak with me. So, we've been on a journey for the last few episodes, and we've seemed to have come to the same doctors again and again. We've done so far now 3 stories with Peter Davison, a couple with Capaldi. Do you see any?
Davison's
any
my
pattern
favorite.
there? Oh, he is.
Davison's my favorite Doctor. Yeah, out of all 4 Doctors that have ever existed it's definitely Davison.
And why is that?
He's
What is so appealing about him?
He's totally my favorite. I think it's the celery. It's the celery on the jacket. It's like anyone who would wear something so random on their jacket as a piece of vegetable matter.
Yeah, no one
it's
rocks.
Just great.
No one rocks vegetables like Davison. Yeah,
and he's got those little question mark things on his collar. It's just great. I love it. I love question marks. I can't say why.
Yeah.
They're so random.
They really emphasize how enigmatic he is. So what about Peter Capaldi? Like it seems like you like a lot of doctors that are named Peter.
Yeah. I love Capaldi and and Per Davison. I like both of them. But who I really like more in all the Doctor Who, my favourite companion is definitely the Brigadier.
Oh yeah,
I love the Brigadier. I love him. I love that he started out dead as a Cyberman, and then he takes off into space, and then suddenly he comes back, and there are 2 Brigadiers, and one of them's got an eye patch. It's fantastic.
Yeah, is that?
So yeah, I really wanted to see more episodes with multiple Brigadiers. So that's why I brought you here today.
Do you prefer Brigadier with mustache or no mustache?
I prefer Brigadier with a mustache and with an eye patch.
Nice.
We've never had the 2 together, but I think that would be my platonic ideal of a Brigadier.
Yeah, and maybe some cybernetic parts too.
Yeah.
Awesome. So do you have any advice for us as we kind of like journey out here, trying to get every episode in random order? How should we sort of approach this?
Well, you got to think about your classic series and your new series, and you've been talking a lot of smack about Moffat, about Dave
A little bit.
and Steve. I call him Dave. He's Dave to his friends, but Steve Moffat. He's he has a lot of ideas, but so did the classic series writers. So they pack them into the show at the same time, just as much as Moffat did. That's what we saw with Mawdryn Undead, and sometimes they pack these ideas in like Turlough's story, which doesn't even work. I've discovered if you do it in reverse order.
Right. So essentially, as we approach this classic series, like there's a little bit of a rose-colored glasses, cleaning them a bit, so that we sort of see it a little more for what it really is than perhaps what we remember it as.
Exactly.
Oh.
So Turlough didn't work, and it really should have just been the Brigadier, and it should really be the Brigadier in every episode. He should have been in Pyramid at the End of the World.
Maybe he
should
was.
have been in Lie of the Land. Maybe
he might have been
was.
in the back there somewhere. Lie of the Land.
That's my hope. Yeah, every time I see a Cyberman on screen, and by the way, I hope the Cybermen do return. They're great villains.
We like them too.
Every time I see him, I'm going to see the Brig.
Are the Cybermen your favorite monster, or do you have something better than that?
I love the Cybermen. I love how they're formed out of skeletons in water tanks. I love how that's the only origin story for the Cybermen ever.
Okay. Yeah, we'll see. Okay, so any other parting thoughts before we activate you to find out where we're going next?
I'm just going to say you are not going to guess where we're going next. No idea.
You know what? I believe you. All right. Well, thanks, randomizer. We're gonna, we're gonna put you back in the mind ray, and we're gonna get Chris Taylor back. 1 second.
Yes.
Let's do that.
Oh, who was that guy?
Yeah. What happened? You okay? I opened my fob watch just now, so I mean, it should be you.
I I think a Yeti walked over my grave. It was bizarre.
Yeah.
A Yeti and a Cyberman walked over my grave.
Well,
It sounds like the start of a Gallifreyan joke.
I'll tell you about all the advice we got from the randomizer after we activate it. So why don't we find out where we're
All
going
right.
next?
All
Hold
right,
on,
let me fire up.
let me get the spreadsheet going.
I'm firing up random.org, which, as regular listeners know, random.org uses atmospheric noise to generate a true random number instead of an algorithm faking random numbers, as they are wont to do. This is the atmosphere is going to bounce around a lot and tell us where we're going next
And
on the spreadsheet out of 297 Doctor Who stories. So you ready?
I'm ready. I have the spreadsheet, and let's just do it. Let's do it. Activate.
All right. Generate 12.
12. Oh my, I'm a little worried.
12.
Oh, it's the rescue.
Ooh.
Damn, we're back in Hartnell. We are
I
back
know
in.
nothing about the rescue. Is it available?
It is available. It's been available for forever. Essentially since
Right.
I was a kid. Yeah, yeah. So we're not yet challenged by our first missing episode, which we
Yeah.
will come hell or high water. We'll find a way to watch it. But this one it exists in the archive. The rescue.
Fantastic.
This is notable for being the first episode with Vicky. This is the first new companion in the series since the first episode.
I'm very excited. I have not watched a lot of Hartnell.
Yeah.
Don't think I've ever seen Vicky.
Yeah, it's a short
Have
one. It's 2 episodes. Yeah. So this is going to be good. All right. Wow. Black and white. Bill Hartnell.
Our fifth Doctor.
Yeah.
William Hartnell, the fifth Doctor.
Indeed. All right.
Very excited about this. Looking forward to it.
Me too.
Well, I guess we will also be live tweeting this on our Twitter account.
Yeah, stay tuned.
63.
Pull to Open 63. Thanks all for listening. For us to talk about a very special episode near and dear to my heart, Mawdryn Undead. If you haven't yet subscribed to our podcast, which this is, it's Pull to Open, it's a podcast, please do. You can find us wherever you find podcasts. Please subscribe, tell your friends about it, and leave a review if you can. Every review helps us, and if you leave a review, we'd be happy to read it out on air.
And should we tell people they can email us as well?
Sure.
Do people still email? If you email, it's pulltoopenpodcast@gmail.com.
Exactly. And feel free to email us there, leave a review, drop us a comment on any of the socials. Like we said at the beginning, we're at Pull to Open on TikTok, Pull to Open 63 on Twitter and Instagram. Hit us up wherever you see us.
Write in and tell us how you would rewrite Mawdryn Undead.
Indeed.
Let's have a Mawdryn Exhumed hashtag.
Ooh, I love it. All right, Chris. Any
All right,
parting
Pete.
thoughts? Or shall we rescue everyone?
I'm looking forward to
from this
rescuing everyone. I may just go ahead and watch those episodes now. I'm so thrilled about it.
Okay, man. I will pick up the tweet thread where you leave it off. I will talk to you next time.